to a little talk really about Kant's influence on Dostoevsky, and then I think I put my title and his influence on Wittgenstein. But what I mean is, and Dostoevsky. By his, I mean Dostoevsky's, not Kant's influence on Wittgenstein. So what I'm thinking of is quite particular. It's about the confessional mode employed by Dostoevsky in his fiction, and how I believe that Dostoevsky was influenced by Kant's critique of pure reason, in which Kant, I think it's in the critique of pure reason, in which he says that what we see, what we see, for example, is actually not the thing in itself. So the noumen is not perceivable. It's just for example, photons on our retina, which give us the image of the thing. We cannot see the thing in itself. And the thing in itself, that is beyond our perception. So that's a famous Kantian premise. And yes, darling. Light them on my wall, please. Very good.
Feel this one. Feel it.
Oh, good spelling. Yeah, lovely.
And here.
Yeah, very good.
And even make these words here.
Yeah, man, that's really good. Very good.
And this record is perfect.
Yeah, very good.
And the record.
Well done.
I do it by getting the end of a paint gloss, a small bit of gloss.
Yeah.
And then when I polished it, I got the other side, and I can easily see it from the other side. Twist the paint gloss all over, it's on the other side. And it's right.
I'm not sure I like leopards too much. The Bible does not speak of leopards very well. Remember your granddad was captain of HMS Leopard, yeah? But I don't approve of things like battleships and shooting, yes? Because Jesus wouldn't have done that. So going back to Kant. So Kant was it might actually have been it was definitely Kant. Yeah, no, it was Kant who spoke of what reality is being beyond our perception with our senses, of course. It's a well-known fact. So I think that Dostoevsky took that and employed that into his fiction in order to, very much so, but in terms of the confessional mode which he uses in works such as Notes from Underground, The Idiot, and The Insulted and the Injured, and The Devils, for example. These are written confessions, and Dostoevsky plays around with the notion of the confession as being true, which is what somebody like Rousseau would have us believe in his Les Confessions. So Dostoevsky explores that idea and says basically how confessions are not true, and that I think we know that Wittgenstein had a bookshelf, and the books on his bookshelf were, I think, very few. I think there were only a few books. Two of those books. One was the Bible, and one was Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. So these books were very influential on Wittgenstein one way or another. Although one of his students, Derek Prince at Cambridge, says that he was not a believer. He said he was certainly not a believer. I see no reason to think that Wittgenstein was a believer, was a Christian. However, he had an interest from an intellectual point of view in the Bible, and of course in Brothers Karamazov. The Brothers Karamazov, again, the confessional mode is there with Zosima's written confession, the elder Zosima. I think that Dostoevsky used. I think Kant is being quoted as saying that he had a Copernican revolution. He made a Copernican revolution in philosophy by this understanding that I think that's pretty specifically about photons being hitting our retina, our brain, decoding those photon images, and for example, that being what we take as reality, whereas the reality, the thing in itself, cannot be comprehended by us. And of course it goes for the other senses as well. And I think that it was taken by Dostoevsky because I think maybe Dostoevsky wanted to perhaps to bring that thought into literature, and to have us understand that what we speak, what is spoken, cannot be understood as saying the truth. It's all about the truth. The new man is the thing in itself is the truth, and that cannot be known according to Kant. Dostoevsky was saying that also words cannot say the truth when we speak them, because of all the hidden motives that's in it, and he expresses that through his use of confession, and how confessions are actually not the truth, even though they purport to be the truth. So I think that might have been the point of departure of Dostoevsky's. I think Kant was the point of departure, perhaps, of Dostoevsky's relentless focus on confession and on what the truth is. For example, it's not. There's the confession of the elder Zosima, of course, in Brothers Karamazov, but talking about what the truth is in the Brothers Karamazov is very important as to what is the truth. You have Misha. Dmitry Karamazov has been accused of killing his father, and what is the truth? The truth is presented by two lawyers, and it's the crooked lawyer who wins over the jury, and it's his version of events, which is actually false, which is believed at the end of the book. So that's very important. Of course, we know that the Brothers Karamazov was just the first of at least two books which Dostoevsky intended to write, and so that's very interesting to think as well. So truth has a very important character in Dostoevsky's last great novel, but it's in Crime and Punishment with Sonia and Raskolnikov. There's the confession there. How much of that is true, Raskolnikov's confession? Not everything. Stavrogin's confession in the Devils, how much of that is true? How much of it is pride? How much of it is self-deception? In the Underground Man, the whole thing is so-called a confession. How much of that is true? We don't know. How much, in The Insulted and the Injured, Volkonsky's confession, etc., etc., etc. It goes on and on. It's because just Dostoevsky, it seems to me, wants to explain how, just like we can't really see the thing in itself, as Kant pointed out, so we also cannot understand the truth of words, except the word of God, perhaps. But that's exploring Dostoevsky, definitely, but that's exploring Dostoevsky's personal beliefs and in his professor Christianity in his personal life. Anyway, that is, I don't think any other writer explored so relentlessly and so deeply that notion as to what the truth really is as Dostoevsky, through the mode of confession primarily, through other ways as well. But I want to talk about confession here because, um, uh, written confession. But in terms of well, if we move on to Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein had Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov as one of the only books on his bookshelf at Cambridge, I think, when he was teaching. Anyway, that would suggest that it had an influence on him, and I think he's said that it did have a very big influence on him. Much as other writers have said that. People like, I think Freud said that, and Sigmund Freud said that no one had. Who was it? Freud or somebody else? I can't remember. Maybe it wasn't Freud. Freud, I think, he's very influenced by Dostoevsky anyway. It was either him or someone else who said that he was the only psychoanalysis from whom I have anything to learn. Is his words. Oh no, it was Nietzsche who said that. Dostoevsky is the only psychoanalyst from whom I have anything to learn. So let's see. Freud, very much influenced by Dostoevsky's thought, and Nietzsche, very much influenced by Dostoevsky's thought. The man god, that spoke Zarathustra very much. Similar to Raskolnikov. And this was before Nietzsche, so Nietzsche was influenced by Dostoevsky. And Wittgenstein, who had this one book, one of the only books on his bookshelf, was Dostoevsky. And obviously Wittgenstein knew Kant, etc. But I think that in Wittgenstein we have the Tractatus, and we have, which is his first work, and we have Philosophical Investigations, the second work. And I've looked at the Tractatus a little. I haven't looked at Philosophical Investigations so much, but what I've gathered from what others like Bertrand Russell have written about Wittgenstein and other people have written about him, it seems clear that he was unhappy with his thoughts about his understanding, really, that words are able to express, that anything we want to express can be expressed in words. I think they were Wittgenstein's. If we can express it clearly, if it can be expressed, anything which is comprehensible can be expressed in words clearly, if it's expressed clearly. And that was his, I think, final. That was what very basically, the Tractatus was about. The conclusion it came to, and he felt that he had settled all the questions in philosophy with that thought. Everything which can be expressed can be done so perfectly clearly if it's written clearly and simply in words. But in Philosophical Investigations, he completely turns that on his head, and you realise that's not the case. In fact, nothing can be expressed clearly in words, and it's through word games that things are expressed, and so he looks at pictures, and there's a famous picture of the woman, which can also is it a woman? I think it's a woman, yeah, which can also be looked at. If you look at it in another way as something else, sort of rabbit or a duck or something. So a rabbit and a duck, sorry. And so his concern is how things cannot be expressed in words or in images, but it's through in the interplay of words, whereby expression is found, but basically the truth is unknowable. I think is the conclusion which Wittgenstein comes to at the end of the philosophical investigations. I haven't looked at this I haven't actually read that myself, and I haven't read the whole of Tractatus either. But I've, as I say, had a look at what people have said about it, and I've read parts of them. So, what it seems to me, from him having Dostoevsky on his bookshelf, Dostoevsky, in my opinion, having, I think, pretty clearly taken on board and ridden with the truth of Kant about the essence being an unknowable essence. All we have is the perception of the essence, and he explores that Dostoevsky in his works by his relentless use and exploration of the confessional mode, and always saying how what has appeared to be one, and not just the confessional mode, but to be honest, in the Brothers Karamazov, for example, with if the courtroom scenes where the crooked lawyer comes out as winning, and his truth being the accepted truth. So it's not just the written confession, but mainly it is the written confession in Dostoevsky. But it's generally speaking, what purports to be the truth turns out not to be the truth, and that I'm sure that Dostoevsky got that from Kant. We know that Dostoevsky is very interested in philosophy, and there's no doubt that he would have been interested in Kant and the greatest of all philosophers. And I think that that could have been his desire to also make a Copernican revolution. Copernicus, who established really Galileo's idea that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and Copernicus really proved that by showing how the Earth revolved around the Sun in 365 and a quarter days. I think that Dostoevsky also wanted to make a revolution in literature, really, by exposing the Rousseauian confessional mode as being false, basically. And I think that Wittgenstein was influenced by reading Dostoevsky's confessions and his exploration of Kant's idea, and so he took the idea that not only, and he got this from Dostoevsky, not only was Kant correct in saying that we cannot know the thing in itself, but also my idea. So he would have, I think, felt this after he had written the Tractatus. Also, what is said is also not. It is not the truth. It needs to be understood as being understandable. So I think that's because I think Wittgenstein also, just like Dostoevsky, wanted to get that Kantian accolade as being a very important thinker, just like Dostoevsky did. I think Wittgenstein also did. But so it's an interesting idea, I think, and one which I wanted to. I also kind of wanted to link that to music, and which composer perhaps is also kind of trying to get to the essence of things. And for me, that is Franz Schubert, and especially in his late works, starting really with, in my opinion, perhaps with the sort of innate. Well, I would say starting with the G major quartet. I would say starting around. Um, I mean, he would have had ideas before this, but I think probably in 1828, when he began his C minor D958 sonata. I think that's when he really wanted to it was after Beethoven's death. I think he really wanted to also get to the essence um, of life by music. So not by philosophy such as Kant, not by literature, Kant and Wittgenstein, not by literature such as Dostoevsky, but by music. But I think he already had the idea, even by I think probably the G major, and probably even I think by the G major quartet. For me, that's the signals that I think that was 1827, or I think even 1826. That was so. It was a few years before 1828. But certainly, by the time we come to the great C minor piano sonata, which is such an amazing sonata, and Richter, Sviatoslav Richter, does the best interpretation of that. Even the slow section, which I've had a go at, he does it in such a great way because he really accentuates the accents there in a very powerful way, which makes that second movement much more interesting. I might even have another go at it because of the way that Richter really plays fortissimo. Really, what Schubert may or may not mark as fortissimo. But Richter's playing, especially the final movement of that sonata, is really great, and I love the way he plays the second movement. Okay, and Tiffany Poon is also an excellent pianist. I would say the standard of Richter. Maybe she doesn't have the physical sort of power of Richter yet. Maybe she will have that, but she's. I think she's. I know that I've watched her begin on that 959 sonata. I really hope she continues that, and then does the other two sonatas afterwards, the 959 and the 960. I remember going to a concert. Can't remember the name of the pianist. But yeah, he did the three sonatas in one evening, and it was a really successful concert. He asked me which one was my favourite, and I said the D958, and that's what my favourite was at that time. Now it's probably D959 or D960 actually, but at the time it was the D958, and I asked him what his favourite was, and he said it was the D959. The D959 does seem to be a favourite amongst pianists, professional pianists, but in any case, I'm going to have a go at Schubert now, which from the Klavierstück number 2. I'm going to try to go through a number of pieces, each one of which, to my mind, seems to encapsulate the essence of things. For me, it's Schubert who really does that, especially in the last years of his life, in the same way that Kant did, and Dostoevsky did, and Wittgenstein did, or tried to do. So let's see if I can record this. essence. So I should have mentioned also Hegel as being as possibly being influential in Dostoevsky's thinking, because Hegel, of course, was also was a continuation of Kant, really, and but in terms of a revolution of having a revolutionary and very important a revolutionary really first importance in the field of philosophy. Obviously, that would be Kant, and I could talk about Hegel and his phenomenology, but just wanted to talk about Wittgenstein and his concentration on words. And I think he was influenced by Dostoevsky. And Dostoevsky may have been influenced by Hegel. To be honest, I'm not sure, but whether he would have been able to. I don't know what the dates are. Let me just check. Sure. I assume they're around about the same time. Let's have a look. Hegel. Hegel dates. Says here, 1770. Well, that's actually the exact year that Beethoven was born. So that's interesting about Schubert, who I was talking about. So he was born the same year as Beethoven. How interesting. Anyway, that was obviously a little bit before Dostoevsky. Not much before. We know that Dostoevsky, so he would have maybe read Hegel too, and he could have been influenced by Hegel, of course, as well. But he was influenced pretty much directly by Kant. And if you want to get a good idea of the chronological way philosophy has progressed, I would definitely recommend Bertrand Russell's The Philosophy of Western Philosophy. No, sorry, The History of Western Philosophy. But it is written in a very proud way, and he favors. By the way, he favors. He favors. He doesn't like Kant as much as he doesn't like Nietzsche at all. He doesn't think that Kant was the first. Sorry, he doesn't. No, it's no, it's not. It's Newton. Leibniz is someone who Bertrand Russell. Yeah, that's right. Bertrand Russell talks about Newton a little bit, but it's not about philosophy. So he doesn't talk about he doesn't talk about any of Newton's works, but he does talk about him a bit. And he says, for example, he thinks Leibniz was the founder of calculus rather than Newton. So yeah, he's got his favourites, etc. But as I said, that book is written in a very proud sort of way. I get the impression, anyway. It's not doesn't make it's not to make easy read. Well, it is very readable actually, but I think it's very written in a rather proud way. So yeah, I could have included a bit about Hegel. But I think I'll stop there with that Schubert, because that Schubert piece does seem to embody getting to the nub of things, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this lecture, in this talk. Thank you very much. See you later.